lovely people, Nina here. So this week I finished reading The Will to Change, which is Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks. I had this on my TBR for a while, or at least since last year, because last year I read All About Love, which is Bell Hooks as well, and I loved this book so much that I was like, I immediately wanted to reread it. And honestly, I still might read it, and I still might read it like maybe this week even, I don't know. But I loved this book so much, and one of my main takeaways from this, like something that she talks about, which I've talked about in another video where I reviewed this, but she talks about how people who don't like feel love or like don't express love try to fill it with like arbitrary things and try to fill that void with things like consumption, and it never really works because having the idea of overconsumption fueling the need for having that like idea of love that they are just lacking, which is why I always think it's funny when people post these books about like 52,000 books that they've purchased, and then they're like, but this is one of my favorite books, and I'm like, oh, but have you actually read it? Like, have you sat down to read it? Because there's a whole like huge piece of this about how society fills their life with things because the things momentarily make up for the lack of love that they possess. So yeah, and I like read this and I was like, oh my god, it so explains overconsumption and why our society is so focused on overconsumption is because there's the lack of love and a lack of empathy and people caring for each other, and it's so predominant right now, and this just explains so much of that. And then so because I loved that book so much, this week I read The Will to Change, which talks about the theory of men and love and the toxicity that can go with it, and the patriarchal system which is built around men and how they react to love or don't react to love. And it's really interesting because she talks about like the patriarchal roles and how like even if someone claims that they're like a super staunch like feminist, how in society and like what they're surrounded by, like the media can like influence their idea of what that is, and so they can slowly start to lose that because our society is so, and like media is so focused on this heavy patriarchal system, if that makes sense at all. So this was just so interesting to read about that, and also like the toxic roles of like men in the household, and how that can be like reversed for any like situation. And it's just really interesting, and she talks about how it can stem again from when they're like babies and like the roles that but like society puts on them to be like strong and like masculine, and that is all rooted in our culture, and again that like pop culture too influence of how we view men, and to hold them to that like the patriarchal standard. And until we break out of that patriarchal standard, none of this that she talks about in here will ever change. This is just such an amazing read, and I was reading it and going, oh my god, it explains so much. It explains so much what's happening with like politics and how like dictators become to be and all of that. And I just loved Bell Hooks. She's such a fabulous writer, and she's so smart. And every time I read it, I'm like, this is why I love reading. And this got me out of my reading slump because I should have just read this first. I knew I was going to love it because I loved this one so much. And I just feel like how society is right now, this is so telling and it explains so much. Both of these, the idea of the toxic masculinity in men and their idea to like feign away from love, and caringness, I guess, like a compassion piece, and then the overconsumption in our society that we feel because we don't have love and void of love. These both explain the current culture that is happening in America, and I just found it so amazing. And like, yeah, I just loved Bell Hooks, and her writing is just like, if you don't read a lot of theory, I love reading theory because I'm a nerd, but if you don't read like a lot of theory, I still think that you would find these interesting, just because the way she writes isn't super like heavy duty, like theoretical framework ish. It's a little lighter, and I feel like easier to understand. So yeah. So I read this one last year. I need to reread it because as I was going back through it for this video, I was like, oh, I love this book so much. And then I read this one this week, and I loved this equally as much. So I'm gonna have to, both of these are borrowed, and I'm gonna have to get another book by Bell Hooks. She has a book on feminism, which I'm gonna have to read. But I thought these were both perfect, also considering that today is Valentine's Day. And I've never been the biggest fan of Valentine's Day because, again, I hate the consumption piece. And as an environmentalist, I hate the overconsumption, again, like she says in this one, to fill that void of love, I guess, and how society fills their lives with things rather than like people, whether that's like family or friends or significant others. And I just have always felt that way about how a holiday like Valentine's Day is just rooted in consumerism. People can think differently, but since I'm uploading this on Valentine's Day, or it will go up on Valentine's Day, I thought it was really important to talk about these two, especially since I finished this week, and I was like, oh, gotta talk about it. So yeah. This is the book I finished this week. I read this one last year, and I'm going to read it again. Both I would highly recommend. And yeah, let me know down below in the comments what you are reading. I would love to know that. So if you have book suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. I love you all. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I will see you next week with a brand new video. As always, free Palestine.